Okay, so now in this video, what we want to do is we want to create the player and enemy missile explosion kind of effect. One of the things about this is kind of going back to how this whole thing functions. The Simple Python game library is actually built on top of the Python turtle library. So we're able to use basically all the turtle commands as well. So when you see here SPGL sprite, the SPGL sprite is actually a child of the turtle class turtle object or turtle class. So anything that a Python turtle can do, a SPGL sprite can do. So we're going to be using that fact today. And probably the biggest thing that we're going to be using with that is the shape size method. So if you notice, we've been using the basic primitive shapes that are built in this case, squares and circles. There's also triangle, turtle, and I think arrow. Now later we could change it to GIF images, but for this exercise we're just going to keep it with the built-in primitives. So you'll see here there's a method called shape size, and what this does, well, it's kind of interesting. Like this is Visual Studio Code. If I hover over something, it gives us some information about it. So this tells us the stretch width, the stretch length, and the outline. Okay, so by default, these objects are about 20 pixels by 20 pixels. So I want to make the shape a little smaller. So I say I'm going to stretch it by 0.2. So 0.2 times 20 is 4. So I'm going to make it basically 4 pixels by 4 pixels, and I don't want any outline around it. So I'm just going to set that to 0. Okay. So what's going to happen is when our missiles reach their destination, they're going to explode. Okay. And what I've done to do that is I've created this frame. So the frame is just a number. So when we start out, the frame is 0. Okay, so when we explode, we add 1 to the frame. So from 1 to basically 29, the shape size is the frame divided by 10. So it'll be 1/10, 2/10, 3/10, 4/10, 5/10, 6/10. Again, times that 20. So I'm just basically using a little bit of math. And then up from 30. Then at 30, uh, it stays until it gets to 55. Then at 55, again, I just played around with the math a little bit. What it does is it actually shrinks the explosion. So from 60 down to whatever the frame is divided by 10, and then it shrinks it down until it hits 60, and then it's done. Okay, so actually, I'm sorry, no, I did that backwards. So from 30 to 55, it shrinks it down, and then once it's over 50 or equal to 55 or over, it clears the object. Make sure the pen is up because we don't want to draw the line. You'll see that in a second. Goes to 2000, 2000, which is off the screen, so we can't see it, and sets the state to none. Okay, so if you recall, we had the ready state, so that means it's ready to be launched. We had the launch state, and then in this case, we're making it to the explode state. Okay, and how does it know to explode? So in our tick method, which as we mentioned before, runs 30 times a second, ideally. Um, so if it's launched, we put the pen down so it has a trail. You'll see that in a minute. We set the X. We talked about that before. We set the Y. And then we check if it reached the target. What we're using here is the Pythagorean theorem. So I've imported math. We have to use the math module up here. So you make sure you import that. And then, so to calculate the distance between where it's supposed to be, so the x coordinate, the current x coordinate minus the target x, the current y coordinate minus the target y. Okay, note these will be slightly different for the enemy missile and slightly different for the player missile, I believe. And then we calculate the distance using the square root. So the square root of basically a squared plus b squared, it's Pythagorean theorem. If the distance is less than 5, we change the state to explode. So if we're within 5 pixels of our destination, start exploding. And then if the state is explode, okay, this is again in our tick, it's going to call the explode method, which does all that frame stuff, etc., etc. Okay, so this is what it looks like. So I'm going to run it down here. So you can see now it's kind of small, and I'm going to, it explodes, and this one's going to explode when it gets to its destination. Boom. Okay, and then it's gone. So that is that. It's pretty cool. Again, it's just a little bit of math. You got to play around with the numbers and stuff to get it to work how you want it to work. But the key thing here really is these states. So when it starts out, when you initialize it, it's ready. It means I can launch it. Um, then when I try to click or set the target, I can only set the target if it's ready. If it's already launched, I can't set the target again. I mean, probably a real missile, you could send it updates, but in our game, we can't do that. Um, and then when we explode, so instead of moving, because its state is going to be, instead of launched, it's going to be explode. So that's when we do this whole frame thing. So on the first frame we do this, second frame we do that, third frame. And again, I just played with the numbers and made it look like that. It just took me some time, a little bit of experimentation. So from 0 to 29 frames, it expands. From 30 to 54 frames, it shrinks. So I use minus here. And then once it goes to 55, it's going to clear, pull the pen up, and go to off the screen and change the state to none. That's how we know that it is exploded and we can no longer use it. Okay, and that is that. Again, I'll put the code on my website. The link will be down below in the video information somewhere.